to another episode of A Day in the Life with OUTPour. In honor of Women's History Month, this March, we are talking to Dr. Monique Howard, our very first LGBTQ ally. Dr. Howard expresses that she's more of an accomplice to the LGBTQ community rather than an ally. An ally stands by the side and watch, while your accomplice gets in a fight with you. As the executive director of WOAR, Women Organized Against Rape, Dr. Monique Howard has had over 2,000 untested rape kits retested, and Philadelphia accounted for a large portion of them. Let's delve into this interview right now with Eli Sumners, and let's take a look at how the Me Too movement has elevated Dr. Howard's work. Let's take a look.
So what's your why? Like, why do you do this work every day? What informs your work?
It's a really good question. I find myself in spaces where it's not the dining room conversation, where the public health issue is sensitive, where, particularly with HIV and AIDS, that's not something that you're going to say, hey, let me tell you about my protease inhibitor, can you pass the salt? That doesn't happen, at Thanksgiving dinner. And so, at Thanksgiving, right, with sexual assault and sexual violence, you're particularly, because of the secrets in the family, maybe sitting across from your perpetrator, right? And so it makes it that silent epidemic. And that's the why, because I want to draw attention to the silent epidemic and the people it impacts.
That's amazing. So can you talk more about how, in communities of color specifically, how those kinds of secrets and things like having your family members be a part of the perpetration of your assault and your trauma, how that affects the people that you work with?
This is a really hard season as well, because this is the gift giving where families are gathering. And we have the secrets, right? And so sexual violence is not something that you talk about, that you disclose to people that are important to you. You keep the secret. The person that perpetrated the crime or the violence may have said something. No one's going to believe you anyway. You're going to destroy this broader relationship if you tell. And so that kind of supports the necessity to keep the secret.
You were talking about rape culture, and in this era of Me Too that we're in,
sure. How
do you think those two things are colliding right now?
I just did an interview a couple of days ago talking about the Me Too culture. What happened in 2017 or 2017 in September when Harvey Weinstein was first alleged of sexual harassment and sexual misconduct. We went back to the original Toronto. I'm sorry. So what happened in 2017, Harvey Weinstein was one of the first people in Hollywood that was alleged to sexually harass and participate in sexual misconduct. And then Alyssa Milano and several of the actors started to gather and say, yes, he assaulted me or harassed me. And there was #MeToo, but that was phase 2 of the Me Too movement, right? So Tarana Burke started the movement a while ago, 10 years, and it was a movement to give space to individuals that were sexually assaulted, right, or harassed. Where can they go to gather to have a community of support? One of the things that happens around individuals that are sexually assaulted or sexually harassed is that they feel like they're isolated. That's the job of the perpetrator. That's what they do. And so the Me Too movement kind of created space, a safe space for victims, survivors to speak out. So phase 2 of this movement that started again in 2017, it is different. It is different. And so on the one hand, it's getting individuals and communities to talk about sexual violence in a way that it had not happened in the past, right? And so that is wonderful. And so it is trickling down to common conversation. And not being as hidden and as silenced in the past. So that's a good thing. The other piece that may not be so good is the pendulum is swung way to the left. And so what happens is, as soon as someone is alleged of sexually harassing someone, the consequence is stark. It is, you're fired today, you're fired in the overnight. So I remember watching Matt Lauer Monday morning, and Tuesday, I'm like, why is everyone crying? Because it was the overnight. And so the pendulum swung way to the left. It has to come back down to the center, right? Where the allegations are made, something does happen, right? There is a consequence, because there needs to be one. Maybe not as stark as firing or being blackballed, right? Because that is exactly what happens to people that in the workplace say that their boss sexually assaulted them, right, or harassed them, is that the survivor was getting blackballed from their positions, from their career, from their jobs and their livelihood. And so somewhere in there it'll swing back to the center where it'll be just for the survivor. There will be justice there. And then the perpetrator, right now it's turbulent. And that turbulence will diminish over time.
I also wanted to talk about, you mentioned Harvey Weinstein. I know that you were tapped to be you were an expert witness for Bill Cosby's trial. How did that come about?
Sure. Well, I wasn't an expert witness, thank goodness. But because it's really hard to work in Philadelphia and not speak positively about Bill Cosby. But I was interviewed a lot about it. And so the place to settle is this. It's a misuse of power and control, sexual harassment, rape, sexual misconduct. And when those people, whoever they are, do that behavior, then there needs to be a consequence for it, right? And so it doesn't matter who that person is, Bill Cosby, Harvey, Matt, Donald, whoever it is, that there needs to be a consequence, because it's illegal, and it's immoral, and it's fundamentally just wrong to use your power in that way.
How did you, as a black woman, reconcile simultaneously being, again, like, you're bringing this man to justice, essentially. You're one of the foremost thought leaders in Philadelphia. So how did you reconcile that back and forth of, this is America's dad, and I'm one of the people who is calling for him to be brought to justice? Like, that fight, that internal fight within yourself, how did you do that?
He's not my father, and my father doesn't rape people, and so I think that's really key.
Absolutely.
And so, Andrew Howard, that's not what he does. And so, for me and my thinking about Bill, again, it was wrong. He used drugs to drug women and assault them. There's premeditation there. There's some thought there. And so there's a plot. There's intentionality that's different. That for me, that's a problem. And when you lay out the facts, then the facts are all the same. And so initially when 10 women came out, they were 10 liars. And 20 women came out, and then they were liars. And somewhere around 60, right? People started to say, maybe there's some truth to that. All 60 women had similar stories. Went to his house. He was my mentor. He was someone I looked up to. He provided me with support. And I went to his house, had dinner, had drinks, whatever. Woke up, and they had it. So that tells you something, right? And there are many people that say, oh, well, some of the stories are fabricated. The data shows on a national level that up to 5% of stories are fabricated. That's still 60 women.
Yes.
And so there's still some truth. And even if you pick it apart, one of the things that came up with Dr. Ford and the Kavanaugh hearings, and for him being named Chief Justice or to the Supreme Court, for the perpetrator, that's a moment in time. They may not remember it. That makes perfectly good sense. They had too much to drink, or it's not a big deal to them. It's a huge huge deal to the victim. They remember all the pieces of it, or the pieces that their memory allows them to have, right? And so it makes perfectly good sense if the perpetrator doesn't remember all the pieces, but the victim does. And so we saw that there as well in this misuse of power, and also in the victim blaming piece. Why'd you go? Why'd you stay? Why'd you come? Why'd you go that way? Those are victim blaming questions, and it came out again in the Ford Kavanaugh hearings.
And I know that you partnered with Temple University at the beginning of 2017. So I read an article that basically said that there weren't a lot of people reporting out those, that you weren't being utilized the way that you thought you would. Have you seen an increase since the end of 2017?
Yes. Small increases. So what happens is everything that's going to be brand new. So even working in the LGBTQ community, we have 5 people now in the support group, and hoping that the word gets out that we are an organization that is open and inclusive, or more inclusive than people thought, that our numbers will go up higher, right? And so same with Temple University. So Temple University has a counseling department on grounds, right? They have one on campus, and it's good. But what the students said, they wanted something that was a little more confidential, and perhaps that the word won't get out that they had a situation and need to report it. And so that's where they connected with us. And so we do have an outstation that's confidential and confidential.
Can you talk a little bit about the role of men within the Me Too movement? Are we taking up space? Is there room for us to have these conversations amongst women? What do you think we should be doing, especially as allies?
Sure. I think men are privileged. I think that there's always space for men. That does not mean that there's not space in the Me Too movement for men. Me Too movement was about creating a place for survivors or victims of sexual assault. But there's many more women, and I don't want to, genderize rape, right? That are sexually assaulted. And so, there's space for it. But I think that the room, you have to be careful at how you navigate the room, because there's going to be more women in the room that have some experience with sexual assault, sexual violence.
So, as allies, what do you think our course of action should be?
Be ready for disclosures of sexual assault, sexual violence. Be supportive, and continue the dialogue. But I think that there's a step back. I think allyship is hard because at one point you stand shoulder to shoulder and fight. Sometimes you stand in front and fight, but sometimes you have to step back and support.
I've got a rebel soul.